Here we go. So it's called A Poem for Anula. Excuse me. Embroidered on a thin sheet of glass a flower, shining is my bright sweet blue. Stop for a moment. Use me as a mirror. Puckered purloin smile in your softly spoken curse. I am your lyre and your dovetail mimic. Squint and pout and twirl about anything, please, and I will follow. Throw those green eyes in disbelief. Share those Ghibli tears. Just use me as your mirror. See the wound as a yours and an ours, and our age which doesn't age the same. That might is not a muscle, but the curve and chisel of the back of your shoulders. They have always bared, always something. And that's it.
Yeah.
It's a little more intense when it's just two people, right? You better have something good to say, Roderick.
Yeah. Feel. Hmm.
Will say my concerns for it are some of the imagery is abstract, and although what I based it off of was a very concrete instance of looking, so to speak, some of it I can't even parse exactly, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's some confusion.
Use the words. Uh, so generally, what I got from it was a sort of um, sense of enabling for a sort of well, it's what I got the most was sort of the relationship between the speaker and I suppose Onuga, being the subject. Um, that being a sense of both vanity on Anua's part and sort of an obsession on the speaker's part, but at the same time, that sort of constant praise or constant affection from the speaker onto Anula is at the same time, especially with the last little bit, being a strain for them. Um, the imagery, I don't think I don't think it's too abstract. It's a little bit easy to follow. I was if you don't mind me asking so early on, Ghibli. Do you mean that by Studio Ghibli or something else?
Yeah, that was probably the most like, this is like not exactly your referencing Greek myth, right? I literally mean the tears that you see in Ghibli movies. They're kind of texture and globbiness and almost nostalgia, childhood esque. Um, I'm sure you've seen a Ghibli film. Um,
Oh, I actually haven't.
oh, you haven't? Here, let me.
Yeah.
I can show you just a picture of what I mean. But if you, oh, that's too bad. There's plenty of good ones that are they all look similar. Okay, some of these are bad, but I would describe them as a mixture of. I mean, they're very textured. There's a childhood emphasis, right? Because most of these are kind of based on coming of age movies. Here's a good one. But big. I don't know. I'll let the image speak for itself. I put it in the workshop. It's uploading. Might take a second. It's quite the big picture. Apparently, it's 2.27 MBs. Maybe that won't work. It's a good one though. That's probably the best one I could. Did it go through? Yeah, big
Yeah.
chunky. Yeah, Yeah, stuff like that. Kind of uncontrolled, right? Obviously with tears, but not necessarily pretty looking either. Um, the term ugly cry, that kind of thing. Although, hard to apply that to an anime. But yeah, so that's kind of what I meant. I kind of wanted to bring that image. But yes, good question. I did mean that.
And as yours and ours has an age with doesn't age. Now that I dwelled on it a little bit, I also got this is me just generally throwing my thoughts out there,
Mm-hmm.
but it's sort of impersonality on the speaker's part. It doesn't feel like the speaker is so much as a lover as is the speaker is sort of reducing themselves with the constant repetition of use me as a mirror at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but the relationship is still a little bit it is a little bit obtuse, but maybe I just need to sit on it a little bit more. Um, and- yeah, there's that sense of synchronicity in that the speaker is asking Anula to um share their emotion with the speaker, with the share those skip the tears, see the wound as yours and ours. Oh, with regards to the and ours, is that literally or is that a typo?
I meant more metaphorically than literally, right?
Um, use me as your mirror. See the wound as yours, as a yours and an ours. Oh, okay.
It's
Okay.
a little bit, yeah. The syntax is weird, but
Listen, an age which doesn't age the same. Hmm. Hmm. I don't know. I think, unfortunately, that might be all you're gonna get out of me, out of just sort of a first impression. Um,
that's fine.
would
Yeah,
would you mind sort of um, do you have anything that you want specific? Do you have any questions, or do you?
yeah. I
Yeah.
I I mean, you're kind of touching on them because I think you're. I guess the imagery isn't so abstract, but here's a couple things. Okay, the first two lines: embroidered on a thin sheet of glass, a flower shining as my sweet blue. Stop for a moment. Use me as a mirror. What is that communicating? Is that clear?
So fun. Oh, attention. Unless the speakers themselves is sort of the mirror, and this is more of abstract way of writing in that. Um,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
writing from the mayor's perspective, sort of like Virginia Woolf with that to the lighthouse part
Oh,
being
interesting.
written from the house's perspective. Yeah, I can see that, especially with earlier I mentioned that it feels as though the speaker is very impersonal.
Yeah, that is interesting. I guess there is, so it is meant to be a love poem. So it is interesting with that in mind that, and maybe my poem is just meant to be, it's just written this way, but maybe love poems erase a bit of the speaker for the subject, right? Um, I'll
Yeah.
have to ponder that. But the beginning, I'll just out it. So because I have more lines to ask about. Embroidered on a thin sheet of glass, a flower. Use me as your mirror. So basically, that was me gesturing in a very convoluted way that she's looking at a mirror, and the image in that is a bright, sweet blue, whatever. And then I'm like, stop, use me as a mirror. Um, or maybe I could have said, use me as your mirror, something like that. So that was like, hey, okay, you're looking at yourself and well, I don't want to ruin it too much yet, but so that's what I wanted to get there. Maybe that doesn't quite track. Um, and what you touched on, what do you make of this? Just give it a go. See the wound as a yours and an ours, and our age, which doesn't age the same.
So for that line specifically,
Yeah, yeah.
wound is yours, ours. I see it as sort of an invitation to an invitation to emphasize. What if we're reading from the perspective of sort of being in the love poem? I suppose it's to share the speaker's affection. You know how when you fall in love, your heart aches in yearning for the person that you're in love with, and that's the speaker sort of asking Anula to return the affection, to share the wound.
So wound is the heartache of love, as
Yeah.
opposed to another sort of wound. Interesting. Okay. Interesting. Cool. And then how about our age, which doesn't age the same? Again, syntax-wise, it's convoluted.
From a very literal perspective, it could be that there's an age difference, but I suppose from a more metaphysical standpoint, it would be that we sort of we the speaker is sort of acknowledging that they aren't they're sort of separate people in their separate existences, but despite them being two people, the speaker would very much wish for them to become sort of one with Anula. In the shared love, I don't know, little yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, I definitely was going for something a little more metaphysical, so I'm glad you kind of touched on that. And then let's see. I can ruin it. I'll ruin it soon, but how about puckered porloin smile and your softly spoken curse? I am your quote liar and your dovetail mimic. Well, I guess what do you mean by? I mean, what do you think I mean by I am your quote liar and your dovetail mimic? Other than the obvious mirror stuff, but
Hold on a second. I need to look that term up.
I actually forgot what purloin means. Oh, steel. Yeah. I think it might help to. Every line is kind of in succession.
Yep.
Like, well, obviously, but I mean, like, well, no, I won't. I'll just whatever you have to, whatever's going on, let me know because I don't. I'll just ruin it in a second.
Yep. I suppose with puckered point one smile and softly spoken curse, I suppose it's just the speaker sort of focusing on there's this sense, yes, I do get the sense that the speaker sort of a way, I suppose Wow, this is just me like rambling about the nature of love, I suppose. Um, with it, with being in love, I suppose everything about the person whom you're in love with becomes special. There's that sense of significance. Their every word they speak, every expression they make. So I suppose the speaker is expressing a desire to sort of steal that for themselves. I am your lyre and your dovetail mimic. At the same time, I guess it's just sort of the speaker is um, the lyre part. I could see as sort of the speaker being acknowledging that they are very much uh, love is sort of very much obscuring their judgment, and because of the significance, because of when you're in love, right, everything about that person becomes special. You sort of the speaker is aware that the words sort of that they say about Anula is very much warped by that love, and it's not necessarily reflective of truth. Um, and then with the dovetail mimic, are you referring to? So I had to. This is a part I had to look it up. Do you mean like dovetail joints, or
Yes,
is it okay?
essentially. So
Okay,
merging at the tail end, essentially, right? It's kind of just chalking up, and with the mimic, it's again, it's just kind of playing on the a mirror association.
okay, yeah. Um, Another way I sort of read that. So this is the first time through. My impression with that is sort of you know, this is obscure, which is why I thought, oh, this couldn't possibly be the correct interpretation. Um, but so you know that sexual selection. Are you aware of it?
Generally speaking, sure, but maybe not the genetics in the way that you're about to
Yeah,
point out.
with birds, they sort of have these with male birds especially, they perform these
Oh,
elaborate courtship dances with their tail feathers.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
in a
Okay.
sense, the speaker, so first time through, I sort of got that as the speaker is sort of lying at the same time with dovetails with courtship displays. It's there's a technical term for it. It's called an honest signal of good genes, where sort of if a bird could afford to have these fancy plumages, they have to expend a lot of energy in order to feed themselves properly. So usually this signal is considered honest because it costs the bird something in order to sort of display these colors. And that tells the female sort of, oh, this male bird that has the particularly colorful tail feathers is has high fitness or has good genes that, oh, I
Mhm.
would want to mate with this male, and sort of use that as a vessel to pass on my own.
I like
Um,
it. Yeah.
so sort of what I got from that is that subversion of that on a signal, right? Because you mentioned earlier, I am your, with the speaker mentioning earlier, I am your liar. Um, the same time, so the speaker's flattery isn't technically an honest signal on the speaker's part, but um, the speaker wishes to sort of to to mimic honesty in a sense, and to signal that, oh, by flattering you, I am sincere in my love for you, and therefore you should accept me. That's what sort of what I got from it, from
I like it.
from the
Yeah.
first time went around. But then I thought, oh, this is a little bit obscure, so maybe it wasn't it.
It's
But
nice to know it
yeah.
works though on a different level. Yeah. Um, Interesting. Thank you. That's very interesting. Because honestly, I thought I'm glad it works on more levels because in some ways that it's just cool when you accidentally could write it in a or it can be taken in a totally different way as opposed to being almost nonsense, which is what I kind of read it as dovetail mimic. So it's nice. I'll take that. I can go ahead and ruin it. So um, the intention was positive, sincere love poem for Anula, which is the name of my girlfriend. And it was upon her request, and it took me a long time to do it. But the idea of the poem was kind of contemplating the way in which someone sees himself as opposed to how a loved one sees them, right? And so that's the idea of the mirror being, hey, you're looking at this mirror, you have a whole series of thoughts and judgments from that exposure to the mirror, you just looking at yourself. And then, my intention is be like, stop for a moment. Instead, use me as a mirror. So use me as a way to inform what your self-image might actually be instead of the image you see in the mirror. Now, in the actual mirror, I think as I'm reading this, I could make it maybe I could add a little clarity with the first scene of the person embroidered on a thin sheet of glass of flowers is me seeing her looking into a mirror and looking at herself. I guess before I go any further, what came to mind as I was reading this is like I could probably make it a little clear that I'm juxtaposing these two mirrors in a way where the second mirror, i.e., me, is a better mirror than the mirror filtered through her self judgments. So with the first two lines, which are essentially, hey, use me as a mirror, stop judging yourself with the normal mirror, and then me kind of just describing her image, puckered, purloined smile, and your softly spoken curse. Purloined meaning stolen here is that I'm smiling at her, and she steals my smile. And the idea of her softly spoken curse, on the contrary to your reading, though I like it, is that I am your. This is me speaking to her. I am your, uh, liar and your dovetail mimic. So what I would say to your reading, the only thing I would differ is maybe just in a technical sense, although you could read it both ways depending on how you do it, is because I put it in quotation marks, it's no longer me speaking, right? It's something she said.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah. And I'm teasing her, like, I call you beautiful and you say I'm a liar, right? Squint and pout and twirl about anything, please, and I will follow. So essentially, this kind of like, hey, I'm a more effective mirror. You're X, Y, and Z positive trait, and you can squint, you can doubt me, etc. Do anything, and I'll follow. And just kind of more sentimental stuff. Throw those green eyes in disbelief. Share those gibbly tears, right? Just like give me the innocence. This kind of a sweet, show me the emotion, and I'll reflect it. So this is the more complex part that I want to see the wound as a yours and an ours and our age, which doesn't age the same. So the first part is essentially that when you're now it's just going to be a diatribe about what I think goes on in relationships, but to some extent the wounds we have in an intimate relationship are shared. It's assuming you've been together long enough where you know see it as a shared wound, that we can both kind of address and we can help each other. And then the age, um, and even a psychological sense, like if someone's got a deep wound, oh, it's going to be part of the relationship. So you might as well think of it that way. But uh, the age which doesn't age the same convoluted metaphysical thing about how the vulnerability that goes on with showing those sorts of emotions, say childhood trauma,
Yep.
is we're always kind of children. We never really stop being children. I mean that in the sense that we're always vulnerable when it comes to certain areas, right? So
Yep.
I don't know, inner child BS sort of thing. But and then this kind of final, what, almost like something you would post on an Instagram. That might is not a muscle, but the curve and chisel of the back of your shoulders, which have always bared, always something. So it's essentially a very, I love you, you're beautiful, and you're strong. Um, yeah, it was meant to be a very, a love poem, just to over No cynicism, really. Maybe a little dark stuff, but that was my intention. Um,
Uh, Now knowing that, yeah, I do see the throw those green eyes in disbelief. Though the green eyes part, is it other people is it other people envying Anula and subsequently sort of wishing harm on her, or sort of um making it so that she feels bad about herself, or that herself is envious of others?
what letter? So throw those green eyes in disbelief.
Yep.
You're interpreting as
So with green eyes, I'm assuming you mean envy by that?
oh no, her eyes are green, but that's interesting.
Oh, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I forgot that. I'm vaguely familiar with that. Green eyes is
Yeah,
envy.
envy
Um,
is the green-eyed monster,
oh,
thing
oh,
from
okay.
that saying.
Ooh, that's interesting. That definitely makes things complex, especially with the mirror stuff. Uh, no, I didn't think about that, but I kind of meant it as like throw those. I wanted to draw up the image of giving someone a compliment when they didn't want to believe it, and they shoot you daggers for eyes. They're like, again, call me a liar kind of thing. It's like you don't mean that, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. So there's some, yeah, there's supposed to be violence in there, insofar as she's saying like, she's kind of giving me a look and being like, shut up, you don't mean that, et cetera, et cetera. Um, Throw those green eyes in disbelief and share those Ghibli tears, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Interesting though. That's yeah, always interesting to see what kind of pops up. Um, Other than that, yeah. Any recommendations? Anything you wanted from the poem, especially given that you know what it's about now or intended to be about, that
Uh,
you think could be
yeah.
improved.
Um, with regards to what you said earlier, yeah, I really, I do agree with that. So sort of, it'd be best to set up the juxtaposition a little bit more, um,
Mm.
by sort of, in a way, you could do it any number of ways. So I won't prescribe a specific one, but sort of just find some way to sort of show Anula that Anula is very much sort of having self-doubt about herself,
Right.
because right now this sort of the sense of self-doubt or a little bit of self-loathing on Anula's part isn't really clear. Um, which makes it possible for sort of, and I sort of fell into this interpretation, just my first time read through, that there's a little bit of vanity in there.
Yeah, I see
So
what you mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
so if you were to sort of characterize Anula a little bit more, with the self-doubt angle, I think it will help um, guide the readers into that interpretation a little bit better.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Thank you. Anything else? Do you think the poem would function a lot better once that starting point was made clear?
Yeah, and then the art age which doesn't age is very obscure, but I sort of the I like its ambiguity because it does enable the reader itself, there's themselves to sort of fill in the blanks. Um yeah, and then with the metaphysical angle, yeah, I think it's clear. Um
Okay.
the last bit, always something. I feel it's
Oh yeah.
just a little bit disappointing because
Right.
it
Right.
is very, very vague. Um, oh, so you said that this poem isn't technically finished. What do you sort of do you why did you sort of stop? Was it because sort of you didn't really have a direction to go in, or um,
It was a mixture of lack of time and because I did this for my poetry seminar for school, so it was a
yeah,
mixture of lack of time and yeah, the direction felt like it was kind of curving its arc let's assume that it was clear in its intent, whatever. Now we're on the strength portion, right? Very explicitly, you're strong, etc. You've all, respect yourself a little bit more with what you've been through, and yeah, that became kind of a difficult place to move forward with. Um, and how did I really wanted to get something physical, the curve and chisel of the back. Um, so yeah, I don't know if you have any suggestions, but I'm definitely open to them.
Uh, I don't know. I usually for the part for parts where I sort of end up with something vague where I don't really know which direction to go in. I either go on a complete tangent, I think, or I sort of if it's about something specific, I sort of do a deep dive into it. Um,
Mm.
and try to fill it out, try to find a little more of the technical stuff to see what could be used to sort of just wrap it up. So maybe
Mm.
something. I think that last part is also a point where you can sort of go into detail about Anula herself, sort of what describe sort of what's bad and her shoulders, her strong shoulders have always bad, um, or something like that. Though,
Yeah.
yeah, with poems about real people, I do see that there's a desire to sort of retain a little bit more privacy and sort of keep things a little bit light, a little bit vague. Um,
Mm.
but that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I like that. As you said that, I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, obviously, it even always something X, Y specific, instance, difficulty,
Yeah.
et cetera, is an obvious one. But then you said it perfectly. Another part of me was like, well, I don't want to. If I would want to share this poem to someone, I wouldn't want to like dox my girlfriend, so to speak. So, um, yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to think about that. I bet I could find some clever ways to.
What you could focus on something things that are a little bit more universal, right?
Right.
Sort of
Yeah.
um, I would sort of resort to a lot of chores with regards to sort of characterizing the subject, characterizing well somebody. I sort of focus when I don't necessarily want to go into detail. I sort of focus on sort of the things that they do each day, sort of as part of a job or
Mm.
just around the house and stuff like that. And then it does. I guess it's sort of an appeal for the readers themselves to project because for example remarking about laundry or being the one who to always do the dishes or clean the house. A lot of people actually have a lot of strong feelings about it because it's something that you
Interesting.
do
Yeah.
every single day, right? Um, but it's not something that gets brought up often in literature because it's so mundane.
Yeah, but it's loaded. I like that. That's a
Yeah,
good tip.
but
I'll
yeah, you
write
have
that
to
down.
just keep doing it until you die. So I feel like there's a
Well
bit of
said.
a
Yeah, that's a
power in
good way
that.
to.
Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Let's see. Give me a second. I'm going to take some notes real quick. Yeah, I like that. So universal in a sense, but personal enough to, you know, I don't know how to phrase it, but universal enough and personal enough to be projected on, or universal but not too universal to not be projected on.
So just
And then the
sort of
beginning.
something that you would take from something mundane from daily life. Um, I also find that it helps to ground things a little bit, especially when you're waxing poetic about metaphysics. It
Yep.
helps to reconcile that with everyday life.
Nice. Yes. Well said. Awesome. I am content. I have very concrete stuff to add to that.
You don't have much
Cool.
time, right?
Yes, about 10 minutes, maybe a little more. Did you want to tackle something?
I have a really short one if you don't mind.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Let me just. Okay, yeah, again, this one's, I put it in workshop. This one's also by a character in the whip, but it's actually signed.
Okay.
Yep. I'll read it. Are you able to see it?
Yep.
Okay. I Fell in Fall by Anthony Zhou. Whether my summer fades or languid ennui ends, the foreboding of September push in autumnal tiger. Blazing stripes of worms brings the season death. Drenched by sudden storm, sentiments wrought with form. When nautical twilights bestride, waits of forests reside, in damp storms dry, beneath cloudless azure sky. My lost autumn cache, its transient bedded ash, set aflame to oxidize, smoking where the gloom rise.
Cool. Let me kind of go over it again. Okay, cool. Yeah, so if I can give you my impression of what it's about really quick. So there is from the first two lines, whether my summer fades or languid ennui, I don't know what that means. Is that like a time period, an era?
No, it's a
Oh, no.
specific
Okay.
state of being.
Okay, feeling of listlessness and
Yeah.
dissatisfaction. Okay. Um, okay, well, that definitely changes it a bit. But I generally took it as my first read, and I bet knowing the definition of how do you pronounce it? Anu? Annoy?
I pronounce it Anui, but
Annoy.
I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. Um,
Um, for boarding and surrender. So I saw it as a juxtaposition between the personal in contrast to the broader cycles of nature, essentially, and kind of the insignificance of that. And I think of our, especially if it's listlessness and being bored, right? Things go on regardless of how you feel. And I wanted to say, assuming that's what it's about, you do that really. The form and the rhythm is a good way to communicate that because the kind of A B rhyme structure or A right? Yeah.
yeah.
Um, kind of gives it this rhythm that never stops. Even the moment, like there's no pause. Whether my summer fades or languid annuit ends, the foreboding of September, pushing autumnal tiger, blazing stripes of warmth, brings a season death, drenched by sudden storm, sentiments wrought with form, when nautical twilight bestride. Like there's no pause, right? It's kind of tumbling forward. So that was cool. If that's where you're getting, at least that's how I'm reading it now.
Yeah.
And then my lost autumn cache trend. That's like hidden away, right? It's like a collection of items. Yeah. Um, what did ash set aflame to oxidize, smoking? Yeah. So loss of possession, potentially life, or enjoyment, or even pain, perhaps. in this broader context of the cycles of the seasons. Is that's my read.
Yeah.
I'll look for other stuff. Brings the season death. Cool. Yeah. The only thing that caught my eye. Oh wait, is that BBD? Drenched by sudden storm. Where is it? Where is it? Blazing stripes of warmth brings a seasoned death. So why that stands out is because I guess it's a near rhyme. Warmth, death, or it is a rhyme technically. Never mind. But also brings a seasoned death. It's not brings a season of death. So that was a slight awkwardness to me, but at the same time, because I don't exactly know what that means. Brings a season's death. What did you have in mind there?
So for that bit, brings the season death. It sort of brings death to a season.
Okay. Oh, brings the season death. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously. For some reason, okay, yeah. For some reason, I wasn't reading that way. Instruments of word brings the season death. Okay, cool. Okay. Drenched by sudden storm, sentiments wrapped with form. Nautical twilight bestride, whites, a forest resides. Awesome. Yeah. So, how do you feel about my general reading?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Generally, if it was yeah, as the cycles of the seasons and sort of contrasting that with a little bit of the personal, um, and that sense of loss. Yeah, it's pretty much aligned with my ideas that
Did you
sort of
try to
went into it.
and then the kind of stumbling form that never loses it never really has a pause, was that intentional?
Yeah, I sort of took inspiration from a lot of uh, Chinese poetry, specifically Oceanic poetry. In that, I don't know if you know this, but every line is the exacting four words.
Oh, it is interesting.
Yeah, a lot of with a lot of Chinese poetry because the word to syllable ratio is almost 1 to 1. So you get exactly that. Because I wrote it this way because for me, since I'm not a native speaker in English, if I want to do something like iambic pentameter or stuff like that, I can't really hear it because I can't
Yeah.
really tell if one syllable is stressed word or if another is. Um, which is why I went with word count instead, in hopes that I would be able to replicate the rhythm of something like classical poetry, but without having to divide everything into iambs or stressed versus unstressed syllables because I can't hear them very well.
It's interesting. I think you kind of strike interesting middle ground, or not middle ground, something of its own, because the rhythm doesn't read to whether my summer fades or languid and new ends. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, all your four words, and then every two, it seems like they match in syllables. Um, yeah, I think you get something interesting because the rhythm doesn't feel. Because I would have to really think about which things are naturally stressed. It doesn't feel like it is designed that way, but in a weird way, because everything else is so constant, it does give itself a kind of the rhythm I said, where it just keeps kind of stumbling forward. Um,
Yep.
Beneath covers the sky, my lost autumn cash, ash, and transient wedded ash. Smoking. I mean, obviously, at the end, there's going to be a natural emphasis with the poems. I mean, with the rhymes. But cool, cool. I fell in fall. Why that? Just the idea of
Yeah.
fall being the when things are kind of falling literally, but also kind of dying.
Yeah. The sense of fallen being the same thing. Being another way to talk about death. At the same time, it's you could read it in any number of ways. You could also read it as sort of like a personal way to sort of open up the poem, which with the sort of the author falling over, and
Right.
and then sort of going on. Uh, so
Is this if you
yeah,
want to the tone here? It feels a mixture of fatalistic mixed with kind of an acceptance. Is that kind of the tone you were going for?
yep. So resignment is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
key. It's the key tone I wanted to go with. But with your regards to fatalistic, what do you mean by that specifically?
Resignment might be a better word to use. Basically, like fatalistic in the sense that there is something to fate that I have no control over, so I give over myself to it in a specifically depressive way.
Yeah. Does it feel explicitly angsty, or is it sort of a more implicit sense of
I would
giving up?
say it manages to avoid angsty and more contemplative with a depressed angle or a yeah, I like what you said, resigned. So there's a depression involved, not maybe emotionally speaking, but there's kind of this lowered state, right?
Okay. Um, any suggestions, any improvements? I know I'm keeping you a little bit over time here, but
That's fine. That's fine. We're just making dinner and can wait a little bit. No, I think not right now. Maybe I'll take another look at it, but I think well, I could tell instantly by the time I read it the first time through what it was generally going for, and not in a cheap way, right? For example, it wasn't angsty, right?
yeah,
And so that's when things are a little heavy-handed. Usually, when it's like, oh, this is more like complaining than it is poetry, which is sometimes sometimes that's
yeah.
just what poetry is anyway. But no, I like it. I think it's effective. It gave an image. It told a state of mind and a bit of a story with that state of mind. Um, it does still. I'm trying to see if it because this is meant to be another character, so I'm going
Yep.
to have to read this in conjunction with. Are all your characters in your whip. This is in it, right? I assume Anthony, Zhao.
Hmm? Pardon?
Are they part of
Yep.
your whip? Okay, they all sound. If I'm recalling, so maybe I'm wrong. They all sound a bit down. There's a very consistent theme of obviously the ecological standpoint, but also kind of the weird position of being a human in that kind of environment. Um, Maybe that's intentional. I'm just letting you know a theme that I'm seeing throughout, right? A lot of
So
contemplations of mortality and maybe not with the happiest angle. Like I think the happiest that I've seen your poems get was probably what is it? The first one I read, I think, where he's in the forest.
oh, best well yeah. The one you said uh yeah, the one with the yellow blossoms of morrow.
Yeah, and that was still there was still a sense of like that the happiness that came through there was in a sense of acceptance or resignment. Um, so it's still resigning, right? It's
Yep.
like, this is how it is. I'll do what I can within it. I don't know if that's any help, but I remember we were talking about whether these voices sound different or not.
Yeah. And with regards to sort of style, diction, and subject matter,
Mm.
um does it feel distinct from the other ones, or does it feel almost like it it's been written by another person who has authored a poem that you've seen before?
I would say for the I just scrolled up and I looked at your other poem in reality.
Yeah.
I think this poem has a distinct tone in part because of length, obviously, and then
Yeah.
also just the subject matter. There's a lot of actually concrete imagery in the last poem, and I think that sheets on a clothesline beneath azure skies, etc., etc. On nights I dream to unfamiliar faces, where this is I wouldn't exactly call it disembodied, but there's nothing like that. So that does give it a different tone. I will say the language, like I said last time, languid and Nui, like that is someone who is well educated who's writing a poem with that. I'm well educated and I wouldn't do that because I just don't know it, right? So
Yeah.
if there's anything that makes a sense of a constant or a narrator between these poems that's constant is probably again the sophisticated language and the ecological stuff, but that's more of a general theme you could get away with. Yeah, hope that's some help. I know that's probably annoying to hear, but
Oh, no, that's no problem at all. I think it's just because my vocabulary is a little bit off like that, um, which is why it sort of bleeds through a little bit into each and every bit. Um, but do you sort of, on the speaker's part, do you get a sense of detachment on the speaker's part? Sort of as almost as if that they're sort of regarding this with from almost like a third person omniscient perspective as opposed to a first person perspective.
uh, yes. I think it starts off very whether my summer fades or languid annui ends. Again, whether is a strong word, right? Whether or not this happens, it doesn't matter, right? That's probably a very familiar use of whether, at least for me. Um, it's rare that we use whether to say like. Whether it happens in that way or, whether it happens that I crash my car or, I don't know, the only time we use weather is to kind of colloquially, at least in my experience, is to kind of give us two examples that end up being the same thing,
Yep.
right? So there is this kind of acceptance. So that's very clear from the beginning. And even the last sentence, smoking weary gloom rise. There's no I involved, right? We know it's probably my lost autumn cash, transient wetted ash set aflame to oxidize, smoking weary gloom rise. The oxidize also helps because um, it's kind of it's an impersonal way to describe your personal belongings uh, going up in flames, right? It's weirdly
Yep.
technical. Yeah, so I think it's very effective if that's what you're going for, that third person point of view.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, cool. This was fun. I hope next time more people show up, and then
Yeah.
um, yeah, and no, but this was still good. I'm happy to do this. This is good fun. And thank you for your remarks on my poem. I will definitely. That's given me a lot of concrete stuff to work on.